In 2017, James Cameron gave an interview where he mentioned a few directors that he admired, including Zack Snyder.
These are established filmmakers now, but I remember being very inspired by them when they first kind of broke on the scene, like Zack Snyder and Robert Rodriguez, guys that were just creating their own new cinematic language.
And I was like, okay, I get what you mean. Zack Snyder has a pretty specific, recognizable style. But the more I thought about Cameron's comment, especially the words new cinematic language, the more I thought, wait, what? Well, as much as I love some of James Cameron's work, this is the same James Cameron who has been working on 500 Avatar movies. So does new mean the same thing to James Cameron that it means to me? Who knows? But we can dig into what Cameron means by cinematic language. I've used the term before, or the term cinematic grammar, to mean the way a director's choices create meaning within a movie. And that means every choice from shot selection to dialogue to audience expectation to acting style to editing to genre conventions to sound design and more. Directors build meaning through the interplay of all of these things. For a more academic take, looking at films, An Introduction to Film by Dave Monahan and Richard Barsom defines cinematic language as the accepted systems, methods, or conventions by which the movie communicates with the viewer. Instead of arranging words into sentences, cinematic language combines and composes a variety of elements. For example, lighting, movement, sound, acting, and a number of camera effects into single shots. Most of these individual elements carry conventional, generalized meanings. But when combined with any number of other elements and presented in a particular context, that element's standardized meaning grows more individuated and complex. So while two directors may use the same technique, for example, a low-angle shot, when combined with all the other elements in the scene, that low angle can come to mean two very different things. In one example, a low angle may invite the audience to identify with a short character, such as a child, resulting in a sense of wonder. In another example, a low angle may be employed to make the character on screen seem overpowering, making the audience feel weak and beneath them. But back to Zack Snyder. We can pretty easily identify specific aspects of Snyder's cinematic language. For example, his use of super slow motion in violent action scenes, his use of dark, brooding imagery, his preference or reliance on comic books for source material, his use of hypermasculine men engaging in displays of tremendous physical strength, filling the frame with particle effects like sparks or rain or snow. These are just some of Snyder's signature moves, his go-to techniques that contribute to his trademark style. But looking at Snyder's work in a vacuum isn't going to tell us much since his work doesn't exist in a vacuum. For example, Superman was already a monumental symbol in American mythology before Snyder made Man of Steel, even before Snyder was born. So let's look at how Superman was conventionally portrayed in film, and then look at how Snyder portrays Superman in his films to further illustrate his new cinematic language. And what better place to start than Superman saving a cat? If you're familiar with screenwriting, there's a good chance you've heard of Blake Snyder's highly influential book, Save the Cat. The title of the book refers to the generally accepted idea that if you show the main character metaphorically saving a cat in their first scene, then the audience will immediately like that character. Immediate good guy coding. This is an example of a writer creating meaning by taking a fictional character and having them do something that is generally accepted as good in the real world. In this case, helping a helpless animal. It establishes a baseline understanding of the character's morality, their priorities, and their willingness to do things for others. Screenwriting textbooks are pretty much manuals on how to create cohesive meaning through cinematic language. Especially in Hollywood, there's a preference for clear, easily identifiable symbols within a movie. Hollywood wants a well-defined protagonist, a well-defined antagonist, and a well-defined goal for both of them to drive them towards conflict with one another, ending in a tidy resolution. But one crucial part of understanding cinematic language is that, just like in real life, a movie unfolds over time. Screenwriting lessons like Save the Cat tend to oversimplify the way that we watch and understand narrative. So let's see how the 1978 Superman, starring Christopher Reeve, directed by Richard Donner, explores Superman as a symbol by having him save a cat. This scene starts with a little girl clapping at her cat and demanding that the cat obey right this second by coming down from the tree.
Come on, Frisky, come on, come down.
Then Superman appears out of the sky and offers help.
Come on, it's all right.
When Superman hands the cat back to the girl, she immediately reprimands the cat, calling it naughty.
He's such a naughty cat.
Superman stops her and explains.
I always tell him not to.
Oh, well, hold on now. Let's not be too hard on Frisky, okay?
Our hero leaves and the little girl goes inside. Off screen, the girl tries to explain what happened to her mother, but her mom accuses her of lying and we hear a slap.
This man swooped out of the sky and gave him to me.
Haven't I told you to stop telling lies?
So it is a literal save the cat scene, but there's so much more going on here. It's about a cycle of negative, abusive behavior. The little girl's harsh words and her clapping at the beginning of the scene mirror her mother's harsh words and the sound of the slap at the end of the scene.
Come on! Stop telling lies.
She's internalized her mother's attitudes on discipline. Superman appears in the middle of the scene to interrupt this cycle and to teach the little girl empathy, which is obviously lacking in her home.
We all get a little afraid of heights now and again.
In the grand scheme of things, a cat stuck in a tree is practically meaningless. But by showing an all-powerful superhero swoop in and not only save the cat, but also give a lesson in empathy, the scene is saying that little moments like this do matter. It's worth our time as spectators or as a hero. The little girl who has a rough home life matters. The little furry cutie matters. Being good and helpful matters, even in a world filled with negativity. Especially in a world filled with negativity. When you put a character in an easily recognizable, realistic situation, the audience gets a very grounded sense of the character and their motivations. It's also important to remember that we don't have a complete picture here, because we've taken the scene out of context of the film. Saving the cat is not what matters in a story. What matters is what saving the cat means in the context of that story. Having your character save the cat is just one type of coding, just as, say, the iconography of Superman is a type of coding. We associate Superman with inherent goodness. Our assumptions form a kind of shorthand, an abbreviated language that lets a filmmaker quickly move the action forward because they had a sense of what we, the audience, already know about the character. Simply putting Superman in your movie isn't what matters. It's what Superman as a symbol comes to mean in the context of the story that matters. Superman saving a cat in a tree is a classic Superman moment, hardwired into the hero's mythology. It supports the idea that, by default, Superman will make time to help out no matter how insignificant you think your problem is. So what if a director took that character, conscious of all our assumptions about the character, conscious of the fact that we associate Superman with literally saving the cat, and then what if that director had Superman do something a little different? Snyder doesn't give his Superman a literal save the cat moment, but we do get a few other scenes of him helping people, which give us an idea of his character. For these scenes, I'm focusing on the moments which were intended to build character rather than plot. In Man of Steel, that means the scene where he saves oil workers from a burning rig. In Batman v Superman, it's the montage where he saves a woman from a burning building, drags a ship across some ice, catches a rocket that exploded, and comes down from the sky to help a family in a flood. I'm not getting into Justice League because. In the oil rig scene, the rocket shots, and the shot of the ship, Snyder's direction draws our attention to Superman's physical strength. In the burning building shot and the flood shots, Snyder draws our attention to the Massiah Imagery, a godlike character floating down from heaven to save us. These images all suggest that mere humans are weak and powerless, and they are inferior to this Jesus-like being. That they're incapable of ever being on his level. It's the polar opposite of the 1978 scene, where Superman clearly saw this little girl as his equal. More frames are spent showing us how awesome Superman's abs are, how powerful his legs are, and how massive his arms are than there are frames of him actually interacting with everyday people. In the shots of the ship, people are barely visible on top. What's visually important in this frame is the immense weight of an inanimate object, and Superman's unbelievable ability to yank it across ice. Again, hot bod, I'll give you that, Zach. In Batman v Superman, we also get a montage intercut with talking heads on TV, who discuss Superman in terms of a messiah, a Jesus figure, as someone who is much more special than we are.
We're talking about a being whose very existence challenges our own sense of priority in the universe.
We, as a population on this planet, have been looking for a savior. 90% of people believe in a higher power.
And now we learn that we're not even special in the entire universe because there is Superman.
In the Snyderverse, Superman is often portrayed as above us, and he pulls heavily from Christian imagery. So heavy, I'm drowning in it! But also, Snyder's Superman never speaks to any of the people he saves, never engages with them in any real way. The closest he comes is seeming to yell, "Go, go, go!" as the oil rig workers board the helicopter.
The talking heads never mention any of the everyday people either, instead speaking in abstract terms about politics and international law. Superman shows little emotion or concern when saving lives, but he does show emotion when questioned by someone on TV. As the montage ends with a bleeding heart politician questioning Superman's authority to act,
I'm not saying he shouldn't act. I'm saying he shouldn't act unilaterally.
we get a shot of Clark shaking his head as if to say, "Nobody appreciates me." So, did the people he saved not thank him? Or is he literally just bummed about what people think of him? Snyder's Superman doesn't seem interested in empathy or human connection at all. In fact, he seems oblivious to human connection. When the crowd lays their hands on him the way people lay their hands on a religious leader, Superman doesn't even look them in their eyes. He doesn't seem interested in the lives of average people. Instead, Snyder's Superman seems drawn to and motivated by displays of power. He's unsatisfied by helping people in need and miffed about what Entertainment Tonight says about the color of his underwear. If a hero doesn't seem to care about human life, then what's the point of them being a hero? But before we get any deeper into Zack Snyder's filmography, I want to modify James Cameron's comment a bit.
Saying that Snyder's cinematic language is new is just factually incorrect. You could argue that his cinematic language is idiosyncratic. You could argue that it's distinct and specific, but it simply isn't new. Snyder draws heavily from all kinds of sources.
Archetypal Christian imagery, Renaissance sculpture, comic book style visuals derived from comic books, pre- and early modern legends such as King Arthur and Alexander the Great.
Blade that cut the Gordian knot.
Running zombies, which at the time was a novel idea derived from movies like 28 Days Later. Even the slow-mo style that Snyder is arguably most well known for is derived from the works of the Wachowski sisters, who developed their techniques years before Snyder made 300. Out of the 9 films Snyder has directed, all but 1 have been adaptations of established intellectual properties, and the only one of his films that has been an undeniable flop also happens to be the only one that was based on an original Zack Snyder idea.
Well, Snyder himself apparently described it as Alice in Wonderland with machine guns, so even he admits that that one's derivative. This idea that a great artist has to be doing something new is really a byproduct of the capitalist obsession with perceived advancement. We always need that new product, that shiny new thing that we can claim is so different from everything else that came before it, that you just gotta buy it. Proclaiming that a director is creating a new cinematic language and that nobody has ever done this before is usually just marketing talk. And it's anti-intellectual. It discourages people from exploring that director's influences because it suggests that there were no influences, that their film simply sprang out of thin air, fully developed. It discourages people from being curious about film history and how film evolves over time. It encourages people to buy a ticket to whatever the most recent blockbuster is because it's new.
Acknowledging that Stanley Kubrick owed a huge debt to the cinematic grammar of Max Ophuls doesn't diminish the work of Stanley Kubrick. Acknowledging that David Fincher borrowed imagery from Krzysztof Kieslowski's film Red does not diminish the visual impact of Fight Club. Acknowledging that James Cameron's Terminator borrowed so heavily from the works of Harlan Ellison that the studio was forced to add a credit to Ellison at the end of the movie doesn't make Terminator any less entertaining or relevant.
But that last example may explain James Cameron's motivation to describe particular movies as entirely new. New is also a concept that's applied differently to different groups of people. Young, cis, white male directors are praised for being new, called prodigies, and handed reins to huge movie franchises, while young female and otherwise diverse directors are denied the same opportunities because when you apply new to them, it means unexperienced or underqualified. Can't trust a young woman to direct a Star Wars, but let's give it to Josh Trank.
Snyder's cinematic language may not be new, but it is powerful. It's powerful enough to take this warm, hopeful character of Superman and make him feel, well, distant, unconnected to humanity, not walking among us, but hovering above us. This feeling is echoed not just in the visual style and the stilted dialogue, but even in the use of Superman's symbology itself.
What's the S stand for?
On my world, it means hope. It means hope.
So while I wouldn't really use the word new to describe most of any director's work, we can describe Snyder's work as distinct and specific. But that leaves us with another question. What is he saying with his work, distinctly and specifically? So grab your Snyder to English dictionary and join me next time for a close reading of the works of Zachary Edward Snyder as we enter the Snyderverse. Thanks for watching! If you want to support my channel, you can find my Patreon info below, but especially right now, if you have any extra money to spare, I encourage you to donate to one of the organizations that I'll link below. And please get involved, engage with your local city council, and check out local organizations that could use your help. Black Lives Matter. Thanks again, and save Martha.